I'm really excited to introduce to all of you Patrick Peach, who's a Hustle Up member. He's also a veteran film producer, line producer, and unit production manager who has produced projects all over the US, Canada, Europe, and Asia. Patrick creates breakdowns, he budgets, he schedules, he's worked with production companies, studios, distributors, producers. He's got 35 years of experience in developing, financing, and every facet of film production from pre-production through post and delivery. And when he isn't working on a production, he's developing screenplays with writers and producers. Some of Patrick's credits include Limitless with Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro, Father Stu starring Mark Wahlberg and Mel Gibson, and 21 and Over featuring Miles Teller. So during the the presentation, again, please do drop your questions for Patrick into the Slido, upvote questions that you really want to see answered, and we'll spend about 10 minutes at the end answering questions. And be sure to connect with Patrick on Hustle Up with his profile link. And so with that, Patrick, please take it away and teach all of us a little bit more about how to budget our films successfully.
Well, greetings. It's great everybody could join us. It's really exciting that there's so much enthusiastic energy on Hustle Up for this. This talk is about what the budget is and the basics of how you start to create a budget and what resources you'll need to complete the task. It's a short overview with a whole lot of information. So I normally teach budgeting over a course of like 3 days with individuals or small groups because it's just so detailed. There's so much information and you just don't get it in one sitting to really do a good, accurate budget. As I said, I'll be giving you a whole lot of details, so it might behoove you to take notes. And like we said, we'll do some questions at the end. When I was 21 years old, I moved from Arizona to Hollywood to be an actor and a writer, and I pretty soon realized that wasn't going to be my route. I chose another form of rejection, which I thought would be easier. Silly me. But I really started out doing, I found some freebies to work on. Once I found those freebies to work on, those people, we stayed connected. Next thing I know, they got me on this little movie called The Aftermath. It was a terrible little film by this guy, Ted Michaels, who's the king of the D movies. He's sort of a legend out of Seattle, made maybe 50 terrible D films. They're all horror and exploitation. But I met all these great people on it. And then one of them got me a job working on Roar, the most dangerous film ever made. If you don't know anything about that movie, you should look it up. It's pretty amazing. I was production coordinator on that. And on the first movie, I was an electrician, a grip, an extra, and I did a stunt jumping out of a Jeep. So, you know, when you start out and you do these things, you get the opportunity to do a lot of different jobs. And my first film, I was 23, and a guy says to me, that was on one of these projects, says, I'm DPing, they need a production manager. I said, only if I can be an actor, which, you know, I found out I was a much better producer. And while doing that movie, I did everything. And it was a guy who had a trust fund he graduated from UC Santa Barbara. And basically by the end of that movie, after doing everything from catering, location management, and cleaning up after everybody, I said, and running all the money through my bank account, by the way, which I never recommend. I said, I'm the producer, and I was. That was a terrible movie. It never got released. It was called Chasing Rainbows at first, and then renamed Friends Again. And I recommend you always read the script before you take the job to produce something. That was my first lesson. I didn't read the script. I basically said, sure, I'm in. But I just was so anxious to get in the business. And then after that, I worked on so many different movies and so many different capacities. I would take any job that was available. I worked in every crew, every possible crew. I'd tell everybody I could do the job, and I'd go in and just fake it. After many, many years, it took me about 15 years to start getting regular producing jobs, because you have to generate your own producing work. They don't just come to you after you make a film. It's not like put out there, oh, he's fantastic. He made a $50,000 movie. That's not how it works. It's usually you have to generate your own work. So to pay my rent, I worked in every crew imaginable. And what that ended up doing for me was gave me an inside out look at how the money is spent. I was able to understand why each department needed how many crew members and what they needed their budget money for their equipment, their purchases and rentals. I learned all that. And I did it on probably 100 different television features, television shows, commercials, music videos. And I worked in every capacity from the production manager and AD all the way to PA and craft service. I did everything. And my budgets are super accurate because of that. So you have to have a really detailed and strong understanding about production in order to do a good budget. Because every line of a budget relates directly to production, a process of production. And if you understand the process of production, you can budget so much better than if you're just guessing at what they do in post or guessing how many weeks an AD needs in prep. You need to know that. You need to understand that and get an idea of what it takes, all the information, all the processes, all the meetings, everything that's going to happen in order to budget for them. So like I said, when I teach the full budgeting class, it's like a course in production because we're talking about production and why we have to do each of the things we're doing in budgeting. So like why we need how many grips and why we need how many people in the art department, et cetera. All those things, when you know what you're doing and understand production, you're able to figure that out. So basically the main steps, I'm usually the first person hired. And the reason is they want to know how much does it cost, where are we going to shoot it, and for how many days are we going to shoot? And I'm the person that tells them that. So I'm usually the first person brought on. If there might be a director already or another producer, but I'm the first person hired. And the first thing you want to do is you want to find out what your budget number is. And sometimes that budget number is derived from you've come up with it yourself. You know, it might be if you say I want to raise 100,000, but where does that number come from? Did someone else tell you that, or did you know of another film that was similar that was made for that, or is that how much money you think you can get from the group of people that you think would invest, or a distributor told you that, or a production company told you that? Wherever you get that number, you then need to budget it to make sure it's real, and you read the script. And you have to go through every aspect of the script and think about everything, because each scene has direct correlations to every part of the budget. And I give when I'm reading the script, I do my own breakdown, but most of the time I give a first AD to do the breakdown, because that's what they do for a living. They break down the script and they schedule it. And you know, so depending on what they come up with, I'm already building my budget, waiting for them to give me that, because I've read it and I've known if it's a type of genre, if it's an action film, I've looked at the stunts, I've looked at the vehicles and the special effects and all those things. I'm already calculating those things. I don't know how much we're going to need until I see the schedule and have that conversation with the first AD. But if it's a sci-fi, I know we're going to have to build a bunch of sets, and we're going to have special wardrobe, and we have to have special props and lots more visual effects. So all those things you start to know, and as you read the script, you're either making notes or you're noting them in your head, and you use that when you start to build the budget. But the breakdown is really important. The AD basically takes the script and logs everything into like a database. The database is his scheduling program. And as he's doing the breakdown, he'll take a scene, every actor in that scene is noted, every prop is noted, every special wardrobe or special vehicle or any of the things they're all noted. And then at the end of doing it for every scene in the movie, he's got this database And there takes each scene and he puts them on a day. And then you can build what they call the day out of days, which is how many days out of the total number of shooting days does this cast member work? Does this picture car work? Do these extras work? And then you have all those individual day out of days that you use to put into the budget to figure out cost of each of that. If you know an actor only works 3 weeks, you're only going to budget for 3 weeks, et cetera. So that's what you get out of the AD. He gives you the shooting schedule, the best order of scenes to shoot the movie. And he gives you all the breakdown information, which is all the day of days and how often each of these elements work. And once you have that, you're able to then start to put that into your budget. So here's an example. I'll show you an example of a schedule. That's a shooting schedule. And it basically is, each strip here represents a different scene. The colors represent interior, exterior, day or night. And you can see how, and then they put them together in this order. And this is, you can see one day, total of 6 pages. And these are all the scenes there. So once you do that and have that schedule, then you take the day out of days, and this is the day out of days for cast. You can see all the cast members. You see it says, it's kind of small, but it says start work. The first line is SW, that's start work. Every W is a work day. Every H is a whole day, meaning they're off. And WF is work finish. And it goes all the way to the end here, and you can see how many days they totally work. So this first person works, says 5 days, basically. So you can, and this is automated through the scheduling program. At least if you use Movie Magic, you get he'll give you a file with all these day out of days, and you basically click on a line, click on the library file, click on what you want. In this case, it'd be cast, and it would just input it into the cast line of your budget. Then you manipulate it however you need to with money and what the rates are. So the next thing you're going to be able to do with this, and what you're going to want to do is you need, first of all, I don't know which software everybody would be using, and I'm not sure if everyone uses the state of the art, which is Movie Magic. There's others. There's Showbiz. There's Gorilla. There's CLTX, I think it's called, and it's a cloud-based one. Movie Magic is the one everybody in the business that I know uses. All the studios, for the most part, this is what everybody uses, and it's connected to all the payroll companies, all their softwares. So Movie Magic makes everything pretty automated, but they almost all do, and they're all sort of Excel based to begin with. If you understand Excel, you can work your way through any of those softwares, and there's tons of how-to videos on YouTube for all the processes in using each of these softwares anyway. So it's sort of pretty easy to self-teach, and you can also take individual training courses from all those software companies. So anyway, when you have your software, and you're doing it, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to start to put together your the information in your budget, and you're going to say to yourself, where am I shooting? So you're going to want to pick a locale that fits the script. And I guess basically at this moment, I'll quickly talk about the difference between union, non-union, and whether this is a feature, short, documentary. Non-union movies are mostly done from about $1.5 million and under. And the reason for that is that it's pretty hard to do a movie in the United States, non-union, for any more than $1.5 million. There's only one place I know of that you can really pull it off safely without getting it organized by the union, and that would be Utah. I know people shot $10 million non-union movies in Utah, but it's not done anywhere here in the US. And they'll organize you no matter where you are. So usually it's $1.5 million and less. If you're doing a short film, you can probably, the budget's just not going to be as detailed as what I'm talking about and normally happens. And you're not going to be messing with unions. You're going to do it totally non-union. And you're going to be dealing a lot with people that sometimes are not getting paid. They're doing deferred contracts and things like that. You're going to break all the labor laws. And that's kind of what happens if you're doing a short, and it's just totally different. The process behind doing a short, you're just going to try to come up with an idea of what you can get away with paying people, what kind of deal you can make for equipment, what kind of deals you can make across the board for everything. The only thing you're going to have to pay for is food and gas, pretty much. Everything else you're going to try to work out however you're going to do it. That's on a short for a small amount of money. But for an example, a friend of mine he does $50,000 and less or less little features, crowdfunding, raising, and whatever. And he sent me a script, said, this is my next movie. I'm going to do it for $300,000. And I read it and I said, it was like Kick-Ass, the movie Kick-Ass, lots of action and stunts. And I said, you can't do this movie for $300,000. He said, well, maybe 500. I said, no, you just can't. There's just too much in it. You should rewrite it and condense it. And he ended up not taking my advice. He raised $300,000 from independent investors, and then a Canadian company came in and said, well, we'll put up the rest and we'll make it for $1 million in Canada. And of course, they ran out of money second weekend. It was a very disastrous situation. And that this was 2 years ago, and he's still looking for the finishing money. So, you have to make sure that you can produce what script you have for the amount of money you actually try to raise or end up raising. And so I'm just saying that the short, you have a lot of shorts and smaller non-union projects. You actually have a lot more leeway because you only have so much. So you do what you can. When you have more money and you start to do things more with the union crews and more traditionally, you get stuck in a box and you make a compromise here and a compromise there, or a change to adjust what you have for the money. But what I find about independent non-union is sometimes you come up with some ideas that you out of necessity that just totally are fantastic and make things work. So ultimately, whatever you're trying to do, either a short or a feature, obviously the rules are different. I'm going to be mostly talking about doing this for more money as opposed to an independent low budget type film, although I'm sure a lot of you are looking at that. A documentary has no actors in it, just a narrator in post, and it's a lot of interviews and it's a lot of footage, purchase footage, found footage, and a lot of small crews going out and shooting small amounts. So it's a total different type of budget. It really, it's total different animal, and your post-production process is much longer because you edit, and then sometimes you go out and get more interviews or get more footage, and then you edit some more and you do it again and again. But this is mainly, we're talking about feature budgeting, standard feature budgeting. So once you know where you're going to shoot, part of the way you determine that is maybe a tax incentive. For example, the shooting in California, the tax incentive is 25%. It doesn't involve anything above the line, meaning none of the talent, directors, producers, screenwriters. And it's very hard to get a lot of competition for it. You shoot in another state, let's say North Carolina, it's 30% across the board, above and below the line, and it's a rebate, so it's 100% cash. The California tax incentive is it's a tax credit, which you have to discount. Someone has to buy it from you, and you lose about 10%. So a rebate's much better. Oklahoma has a rebate. Oregon and Washington have rebates. The rebate states are real popular because you get 100% cash. So that's going to be a decision you're going to decide about where to shoot your film. It's going to be a part of it, I'm sure, with the financing. Another thing is maybe it's in the script it's written for New York, so you think you have to shoot in New York. We shot Limitless in Philadelphia for New York. So just because it wasn't New York and it was a lot less expensive. People shoot in Toronto and call it New York all the time. So, you know, it just depends on what the intricacies of your script are and what the setting is, where you decide where you're going to shoot. So once you have that decision on where you're going to shoot and what kind of what the setting is, et cetera, then you start to set the budget up to put in the information. And the first thing you've got to do, and I'll share a budget with you real quick here. Let's see. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to set up your you're going to set up what we call you're going to set up the print. Pardon me? Oh, okay.
I'm sorry,
We're gonna set
someone
the
was
fringes.
unmuted them.
And the fringes are basically the payroll taxes and union fringes that apply to all the labor. You'll want to find out what the minimum wage is in the state you're working in. That's particularly important for a non-union film because you're starting at minimum wage. But that's also what you pay your PAs and your assistants most of the time, and sometimes your extras. So that's an important one. And then you need to find out what their workers' compensation rate is, and you put that in. This one is Washington. It's 3.61. And the same thing with state income tax, state unemployment. And so you put those numbers in. And
While we're on this page, Patrick, it's H, not to interrupt, but I just wanted to ask you, the latest versions of Movie Magic or some of the other programs, do they automate that information for you? Like if you pick the location where you're shooting, will they pop in all that data, or you need to look it up through a resource?
Because it changes.
Okay.
It actually changes so much, it's not something they can automate. That's why you have to do it now. You know, the best thing you can do as a producer, line producer, production manager is to become friends with accountants, assistant directors, and payroll companies, because they can give you all this information a lot easier and faster. I often give my first draft of a budget to an accountant, and they run through all of the fringes, and they make sure that I've done them appropriately. They've also make sure I've tagged every line for the tax incentive that I might be using. They make sure those are done properly.
That was actually another question I wanted to ask you, Patrick. It's a two-parter on tax incentives, and maybe I'm jumping the gun. Maybe you're going to cover this, but how much does a tax incentive influence where you shoot these days, and how do you bake the tax incentive into the budget? Because you have to make an assumption you're going to qualify and get it, right? And then timing of it coming in and all that kind of stuff.
I'm sorry, the last part of that?
Just how do you show it in the budget? How do you sort of bake it into the budget, given?
Well,
you
you're
don't-
tagging
you can't
every
know if
single.
You're gonna get it.
I'll show it. Well, I'll get to that basically.
Great.
But we tag lines. Once we've set up, I have to set up the incentives as a group. It's a whole different setup. It's not the same as fringes. It's groups. And you see all these color codes. This is labor, and labor is green. So you can see that I've gone into the budget here, and hang on a second. I'll go in here and find a labor line and show you production designer. So you see they're all in green. So I've tagged them for the local labor tax incentive. And how you do it is you take the line and highlight it, and you go to groups over here, and you find the group, and you click that, and now it's tagged for local labor. And you do that through every line of the budget, every line of the budget for the tax incentive. If it's a purchase and rental, it's just a different tag. So once you set up your fringes and your globals, your groups, the next thing you do is you set up your globals. And globals are the rates and the number of shoot days, the number of shoot weeks. It can be car rentals, hotels, it can be airfare, it can be equipment rentals, et cetera. And what you're putting in are rates and rates and hours and things like that. And the reason globals are great is they automate your budget for you. So while you're putting in this information, you put in the number of weeks they work, you write the word week, it'll automatically put it in as week or days because you've designated that in the global, and then it comes over here and here's the rate. It says department head. So that's the department head weekly rate that I've already set up in the globals up here. And I use that global, and I just write department head. Now, the reason it's great because once you put it in here, the next thing you do is you can highlight it and bring it down, and it puts it in automatically, the rest of the lines. The other aspect of the globals that are great is that if, let's suppose you decide you move to a different state and the rates are different, or the contract changes and the rates go up, you go back to the global and you change that global, every single department head throughout the budget is automatically changed like that. So it really saves you a ton of time and you don't have to do things over and over and over. But the process, like I said, it's all very, very automated. It's easy. It's Excel based. And it's simple, it's you go in the first line and you put the number of days they work, the number of weeks, and the multiplier. If it's like this is a multiplier, if I was doing days, I'd put 5 there, make this 1 and make that 5, and then here's the rate. It's simple throughout the budget that way. Same thing with rentals and purchases. The rates. Getting the rates is what you do with rates is you're gonna, depending on, let's talk about non-union. So on a $1.5 million movie, you're gonna be shooting for no more than probably, you're lucky to get to 20 days, it's probably gonna be 18. If it's non-union, and that means not IATSE for the technical crew, or Teamster for the drivers, it still would be SAG, SAG for the actors. It's always going to be that unless you're doing a real small short and there's no SAG actors in it. Then what you're going to do is if you're doing like I say, a non-union, you're starting with minimum wage and you're going up. Minimum wage in California right now is $16 an hour. In like Washington, it's $19.26 an hour in the state of Washington. It's actually 16 in the state and 19 in Seattle. It'll be 20 here in Los Angeles next year, I believe. So that's sort of where you start. And so you have to start, that's where you start. And then you're going to pay people an average of, I don't know, probably 200 a day to 400 a day on a non-union movie. And the benefit of non-union, in this case, not doing it union, is you don't have to pay for the union benefits, the fringe benefits, which usually are going to be about 30%. So at the end of the day, you're saving a decent amount of money on that end. And you just can't afford it if you're only doing $1.5 million movie. Although I've done movies that size that were union with IATSE and Teamsters, and all the unions have low budget agreements to encourage you to use to work with the unions. SAG has 3 levels, starting at 3 million with diversity. That's a low budget contract. 2 million after that, below that. And then they have their micro budget deal. And they're all made so that you can actually shoot the movie and not have your budget killed. Same thing with IATSE has 7 levels. There's a low budget contract that has 7 levels to it. There's an alternative to their basic agreement, which is their main agreement, which is there's a thing called production cities. The main production cities: New York, Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, Orlando, Los Angeles. If you're not in those cities have a higher rate. Not in those cities, you can use what's called the area standards agreement, which basically boils it down to the key rate, the second rate, the third rate, and everybody across the board is almost identical to it, and it's slightly less than the top rates in the basic agreement, and you get a lot of benefits with that contract. So, Teamsters have a low budget agreement under $8 million, and if you're doing a tiny movie and you go here in Los Angeles and you go into the Teamsters and you explain to them, I'm doing this movie for $500,000 and I don't, or $1.5 million, I don't want to have a problem with the Teamsters, they actually will work with you. They actually say that in their agreement, that they will work with individual producers who come to them with ultra low budget projects. WGA has a low budget contract for the Writers Guild, $5 million and under. So all the unions have made it so that you can use even the DGA, they've got 7 levels as well. So the main thing they want is their benefits, union benefits. That's always there's no savings in that when you do it with them. They make the worker gets paid less, but they still get the union benefits, which go directly to the union and help pay the union guys' salaries as well. So it's sort of a double-edged sword, but it's the way it works. And I've got if you want to take a screenshot, I'll show you a document here that has all the union, how to get their rate sheets. Here's the WGA link. There's SAG-INDY is better than SAG-AFTRA because SAG-INDY is actually tailored specifically for low budget independent film producers. The DGA link is here. IATSE's low budget agreement is being negotiated. The low budget agreement just came out and there's the link for that. Their basic agreement is coming out after July 1st. They're not done negotiating it, but they're close. So till then, this is the link for that. There's another document with all the rates in it. It's called the Paymaster, and it's a big document that payroll people use, that accountants and payroll services use. It has all the rates in it for all the unions, including Canada. And it's a really great document, and every line producer that's working that I know uses the Paymaster. It just consolidates all the union rules and everything, rates, into one document. Here's another couple things for this right here, for good director of crew, rental houses and production resources. That's it's called LA 411, and basically, back up until the 90s, living in Los Angeles, we had this big map book. It was called the Thomas Guide. It was before GPS and smartphones, and it had a map of everything in California and in the city you were in, and you had to have it. You had to have it in your car if you wanted to get around. Well, LA 411 is that directory. That's what we had before we had the internet, and it was this directory of every crew member and every rental house and everything. Well, there's an online version of it still, and it's really good for people who don't have all those contacts yet to find all kinds of different things, stages and support services, camera, grip electric, crew, all that stuff. And then this website, Studio Binder, if you haven't discovered it yet, it's pretty good. It has all kinds of information about filmmaking in general, budgeting, scheduling, and all the things we're talking about. So those are just some things that, like I said, I would you should take a screenshot of that if you can. So anyway, then once you've got the rates, and as I say, they're usually like, there's a key rate, a second rate, and a third rate. On a low budget film, the smartest thing for you to do is to make them all equal. Nobody gets any more than the other because all crew members talk. And as soon as you pay one guy more, a comparable person hears that and they're in your face asking for the same deal. That's one of the beauties of the union contract. Everything is the same and you can just live and die by it without any argument. When someone wants more money, we give them a kit fee sometimes, which is an additional cash amount that doesn't go on, that doesn't look like it's part of their payroll. It's not taxed. And it's basically a way of giving them more money. A lot of people get hired and have a kit fee regardless of whatever they're being paid. Because they actually come along with a lot of tools that they bring and they expect that to be additionally compensated for. But on low budget, that's a way you can pay somebody more who needs more and you really need them, but you don't want to pay them more than someone in a comparable position. But the philosophy should always be to try to keep everything as fair and above board as you can, so you don't have any kind of a mutiny on your hands while you're shooting. And again, that's one of the beauties of doing something with a union, that doesn't happen. They bitch about other things, but that they're not quitting the show because you didn't pay them overtime, because if you don't pay them overtime, you're penalized by the union. So anyway, as you start to deal with this, another thing you need to learn about how to use the rates and how to budget a rate is you have to learn what pay hours are. One pay hour is your hourly rate for 1 hour. And for straight time is 8 hours. So the first 8 hours, that's 8 pay hours. But when you get into overtime, it multiplies. So time and a half for the next 4 hours to 12 hours, that 4 times time and a half is 1.5 is 6. So 6 and 8 is 14. A 12-hour day is 14 pay hours. And that's important for your math as you're doing your budget. In the multiplier for hours, if I put in 1 day and I put the number 14, that represents a 12-hour day, and then I put the rate, I'm going to get what a 12-hour day is costing me. So that's important to do. And so it's just a basic thing you need to learn. It took me a while to figure out why I kept seeing those numbers. And it didn't make sense to me that 14 was 12 till an accountant told me. I did most of my first budgets by hand, by the way. So anyway, I budget 13 hours a day, every day on every movie. And that way I've always got overtime budgeted already. Overtime happens, it will happen, and you have to budget it. If you don't budget it, you'll be over budget somewhere else. So if you budget it, you're ahead of the game. Another thing you have to budget is meal penalties. On a union show, I budget 3 meal penalties a day. I budget 1 for lunch and 2 for wrap, because it almost always works out that that's what, if they get them, that's what they are. Makeup always has meal penalties because they come in so much earlier than everybody else, and they often don't get a chance to eat. Big union shows, they get paid thousands of dollars in meal penalties because they refuse to help you out and eat with you on that. So on your basic, I put in, as I say, on the union thing, I put in 3 a day, and having 13 hours of overtime budgeting for 1 hour of overtime beyond 12 a day and 3 meal penalties a day seems to work out really great. And at the end of the day, I usually have a little pad there, which has helped me in another part of the budget where I might not have had enough money. On a non-union film with non-union workers, the only meal, you have to break after 6 hours, but the only meal penalty you owe a non-union worker is 1 hour of their salary. So I budget 1 hour of their salary every day as a meal penalty as well. So if someone's making $20 an hour, 1 meal penalty is $20, and it doesn't accrue. Like if they don't eat for 2 hours, it's not like they keep getting $20, they just get one payment of 20. On the union, it accrues and grows. So anyway, those are important things you have to do. OT and meal penalties are super important to make sure you put in your budget. So above the line is, I'm going to show you the budget again. Above the line is basically, oops, that's the schedule, pardon me. What was that? Above the line's all the creative. My budget now. So this is above the line. All the creative people, all the talent, screenplay, the producers, the director, the cast, the stunts, the casting director. They're all in here. They're all, they're all part of above the line. And then their travel and living is part of it as well. So if you're going out of town, their airfare, hotel, and per diem is all there. On a non-union movie, you still have travel and living. The only thing you don't have are union fringes and set rates. Below the line is everything it takes to make the movie, to shoot the film. All the people, purchases, and rentals that it takes to shoot the film. That's below the line, and they can and that's the production period below the line. Post period is also below the line, and that's all the putting the movie together. That's the editorial, the music, the sound. Production film and lab is basically the coloring, the color correction, and cleaning up them, so you have one edited long piece that is a digital, perfect, beautiful film, and it's combined with the sound and the music. Main and end titles and visual effects, those are all in the post process. And then there's another section called general expenses, and it's promotion and marketing, production, legal, and post accounting, your insurance, and banking, and some other general expenses. And if you are going to be doing a union film and it's fairly low budget, you're using the low budget contract, you must buy that, rent that contract from someone who already owns it. People that already have an agreement with the union to do a number of movies, they have what's called a term agreement. So you have to pay them $10,000 or whatever the deal you can make with them. And then you use their contract and you get all the non-union, all the low budget rates for the union. And that's only with the IATSE. That's the only one you have to do it with. Everyone else you can do a one-off with. You can sign up with SAG for one time. You can sign up with the Teamsters for one time. Signing up with the IATSE for one time is impossible for the low budget agreement. It's only for a bigger move. So then under general expenses, we have the completion bond. The completion bond's the insurance company that basically guarantees your movie will be finished. And you have to work directly with them, and they approve all the budget costs and everything. They approve who your line producer and accountant is, who your production manager is. They want to know everything about the movie, because if you go over budget, they have to spend their own money. And that's the last thing they'll ever do. So it's a very important thing to have. It's a really great thing to have, because it makes you sleep at night. You know that, you've got someone behind you that's going to back you up if things are falling apart for some reason out of your control. Then there's a contingency, which is always the bond companies demand a 10% contingency if you're doing a non-union film and it's independent. If it's independently financed, particularly, you don't have to have a contingency. You don't have to have a bond fee. If it's used a bank of any sort, you're going to end up with a completion bond, because a bank would demand that. And then they'll make sure you have a 10% contingency. The contingency covers all the things you could not have planned for, or maybe forgot, or maybe changed while you were shooting. And having a 10% contingency is, again, something that helps you sleep at night. You could have 5%. I did a movie called The Last Word with Shirley MacLaine and Amanda Seyfried in 2016, and we had a 5% contingency. And my director is a great director, very talented man, very demanding, and things went kind of crazy because of the things he wanted to do. And we ate up that 5% contingency shooting. So when they got to post, they didn't have any extra money. And Amanda Seyfried put up money for the entitled song because it was written into the script that it had to be a song by the Kinks, and they knew they needed that song in the end. And so she ended up paying 60 grand for that song and out of her own money because we didn't have it. But it was a real tough thing. The accountant, I told the accountant I thought we were going to run out of money, and the accountant disagreed with me. And of course, I should have known I was watching it closer than the accountant. But at any rate, so that's the kind of thing can happen. A 10% contingency will make you, again, cause you to not have stress in your life, no matter what size your budget is. Everything's relative. If I'm doing again, if I'm doing a $1.5 million film and I have $120,000 contingency, because that's what it probably worked out to be. A cost of the day, the shooting cost of the day on a $1.5 million film is probably $15,000 to $19,000. So if I go over budget, I know I have that in the contingency. It's not even not even if we went past the schedule. On a $20 million film, the cost of that could be $200,000 a day. So that could be danger if you go over. We were over on a film called we thought we were going to be over on a film called The 24th, a really great period film we shot in 2019 in North Carolina. And I knew we'd be okay, but one of the producers was so nervous, they said, let's just cut a day out of the schedule. Now, you never do that. No director's ever letting you do that. But this director did, and we stayed on budget for the rest of the movie. It was great. We ended up coming under. We had extra money to do extra things in post. So it was, I would say it was a decent decision, but I wouldn't have done it if I was them. But anyway, if you have a big, and we only had an 8% contingency incidentally. So if we'd had a 10%, we might not have done it. So the contingency is super important. So those are important things that you need to know and need to do when you're putting your budget together. Let me see. There's a lot of interesting things that go on in budgeting any movie. But if you have stunts, you have to plan for what's called stunt adjustments. Every single stunt that is done by a stunt person, they get an additional bump for depending on the danger of severity or possible injury of that they could have. And like driving a car, they might get $100 for. Faking a crash, they might get $300 for. Things like that. So ultimately, you have to plan for that. On Father Stu, we had a guy who T-boned a car and flew 30 feet through the air, literally flew 30 feet through the air. He was padded up everywhere. He was made up to look like Mark Wahlberg. And then he hit the ground, rolled, and slid about another 30 feet. And he got up and said, "Hey, did you get it?" And we had 5 cameras and we got it. But we were all blown away. Our jaws were open, and we paid him $5,000 stunt adjustment because it was that dangerous, that serious. So it's the kind of things you need to think about that aren't normal. When you finish with your budget, there'll be a cash flow, which is how much money you need every week to spend. It's really good if you have a bank loan or an investor who doesn't want to give you all the money at once. They want to give it to you in dribs and drabs. Well, you can give them a cash flow. It says, I need 100,000 this week, 200 next week, 3, etc. That's a cash flow. The accountant does that right after you finish the budget. And it's a big document that everybody needs. The other thing you do is once you start prepping and shooting, you do a cost report, which is how you track all the expenses. And the cost report is a different document that the accountant and payroll company generate. And it's basically the budget, but shows how you're spending the money and shows where you're over and where you're under. And you're able to week see how you're spending it And if you need to make adjustments, I'm saving money here in overtime. I need more money down here in catering. We're feeding too many people, or et cetera. So you do those kind of adjustments on a weekly basis, and it helps you stay on track and know where you are. And that's called a cost report. And it's a vital document to making sure you stay on budget. So that's
Patrick, let's jump into a few questions still.
that's kind of the overview.
Yeah, thank you so much, Patrick. That was great. I think, one thing that I see as a really important takeaway from everything that you've said is just that, knowledge is power when it comes to budgeting, really understanding the film you're making, the script breakdown, what are the props, what are the locations, what are the stunts, all of that. And also, what do you need to pay your people, right? Everybody needs to make a living wage. They need to make what they should earn, whether they're union or non-union. So making sure you really think through all of those particular things as you're putting your budget together. And we have a couple of questions in relation to that I think are kind of interesting, Patrick. One question is, what are the most common expenses that new filmmakers are not prepared for, or maybe miss or underestimate? Is there a particular area of the budget you've seen green line producers miss or filmmakers not think about?
Yeah, it's locations, transportation, and art department, always. Art department, for example, and this includes props and set dressing and construction. In order to do a lot of the things you do in a hurry, I need a piece of furniture here that doesn't exist. I need a wall that doesn't exist. I need something like that. And those things sometimes have to happen, and so they happen, and it just costs money you didn't expect. Props are a very tricky budget because it includes graphics, labels on things, and license plates on cars, and decals on police cars, and printed material and things like that. And sometimes you underestimate what that's going to be. With regard to transportation, it's an insane department because in California, in LA, you have to move a lot. So basically, if you're doing a film that has several locations, and you have what we call company moves, where you move from one location to another in the course of a day, or maybe two locations, you need a lot of vehicles to make that happen. You need drivers to drive them, and it costs you time as well. So transportation can explode very easily with additional truck rentals, driver overtime, more gas, etc. And then locations is the hardest, biggest, most giant pot of money pocket. What do you call it? It's a hole. It's a sinkhole of money in LA.
A money pit.
In LA, but in LA particularly because it's the company town and all the locations cost a lot. Everybody expects money. Parking is insane. I paid $5,000 a day for parking, average, on a film I did in 2021. We shot in LA. $5,000 a day.
And that's when everybody was still staying home, so there was lots of free spots.
I needed huge parking lots to put my company because it was a $25 million movie. So we had lots of vehicles, and we had COVID as well. So we had to set up COVID testing and stuff. But it was parking. They just charge a ton here, and locations aren't cheap. A house here in LA to shoot interior, exterior, average house is going to cost you $5,000 minimum a day, minimum. You shoot this in North Carolina, it's going to cost you $2,000, maybe $2,500.
Well, and that's a great point that actually leads to a follow-up question somebody else asked, Patrick, which is, what tips should writers keep in mind if they want to write a low-budget screenplay? Like, how do they keep their screenplay $1.5 million or under? And I'm sure part of what you're going to say is locations.
Well, that's true. The rule of thumb for a low budget film to be able to be made and be made well is a small number of cast, small number of locations. there's a horror film called It Follows. Great horror film. Great horror film. They offered me to do it, and I was doing another movie, and I should have taken that movie instead. They were making it for $750,000. And they sent me the script. I said, this is not just a great script, it's going to be so easy to make because it was just a few houses and a few people. And that's how you do it. If the
Saw
more,
was one room, right? Reservoir Dogs, one location. These are
well,
filmmakers
Reservoir
that are
Dogs had
doing
a few
stuff.
locations, but yeah, for the
Yeah,
most part, it's sort of like the more places you go, everything costs. Parking, police, where do you put the extras? Where do you put the company? Where do all those things? The location itself. In California, in LA, I'm telling you, that's the worst place to shoot in terms of locations. It's too expensive. But that's why I shoot a lot out of state. So those are areas that always grow.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. How much does the tax incentive influence where you'll go scout a movie? Like, do you head straight for Atlanta or New Orleans or New Jersey? Like, are there, and are now locations getting more expensive in those places because they know everybody's coming for the tax benefit?
I'm not a fan of New Orleans, nor Atlanta. Shooting in Atlanta, if you're shooting anything that's not a big studio movie, it's going to be hard to get a crew because they all are jumping at the first opportunity to work on the bigger movie. So if you have a crew, they're going to leave you. We recently were talking about doing a $4 million movie there, and I said I talked to several people. They said your crew will leave. I have a friend who started a project. By the time he was done, his entire crew, every single member of his crew had changed out.
Oh man, that's rough.
So I'm not a fan of that. No, I go where they have a crew base, so you don't have to bring a lot of people, and they have a great incentive, and you can fairly get away with not bringing everybody. I like North Carolina a lot. It's got a nice incentive. There's lots of crew there. There's lots of facilities. Washington and Oregon are great. Jersey is not as good because it's caught between New York and Philadelphia and Maryland, and so the unions are a mess. I love Illinois. It's great. Chicago has everything you could ever want in terms of crew and locations and facilities, and their talent pool, their acting pool is fantastic.
Just
It's
don't
busy.
shoot there in January. I shot there in January. That wasn't
Me
so
too.
fun.
It's cold, but it's.
I want to move on to a couple more questions, Patrick.
Yeah.
Stephanie asks, do you ever have, this is a great question, actually. Do you ever have your department heads prepare the budget for their particular department to help you sort of, get the scope of what they're imagining? How do you kind of go back and forth with your department heads?
Well, once they're hired, I asked them to do a budget, so that then we can see how far off we are and what we have to do to make it work. Because sometimes they have a different idea than I did when I was doing the budget, and they could be right, or they could be thinking too big. I did this film 21 and Over with Miles Teller up in Washington. The Rip and Electric crew, we went out for our tech scout. When we came back in, the rigging crew, these are the guys who set up lights before we come. They lay cable and lights and grip and everything. They came in, they came in with $100,000 budget. I had 30, and they said, well, it's just bigger than you said it would be. And so I had to call in the cameraman, the director, and explain to them that we can't do what they want to do. And they ended up changing everything. They ended up changing everything because they knew that we weren't going to get more money for it. But I've done it with all my departments. Transportation is one, and art department and locations I always do, because I'm oftentimes not as informed about a lot of those things than they are.
Yeah,
So,
makes total sense. Go to the experts, right?
Yeah.
That's related to one other question that I'll ask, and then we'll wrap up, which is, and thanks everybody for staying on a little bit longer. This Q&A is great. Are there any tricks of the trade? Where would you place your money to make a lower budget film look more expensive or come off as more expensive than perhaps it is? Andrew was asking, what are some places you can put money in the budget to get the most out of your production value? It may depend on the genre and the film, but I'm curious if you have some thoughts on that.
Where can you put more money to make your film better? Was that the question?
Yeah, to make your film look less low budget. Where would you
Oh.
sort of allocate?
Well, one of the secrets to knowing you're watching a low budget film is extras. If there aren't a lot of extras where there should be extras, it's a low budget movie.
That's a telltale.
Art department gives it away a lot. If it's not dressed properly and realistically, same thing with props. If you have an expensive house and the stuff that doesn't look that expensive, it's a problem. And wardrobe too. Those are the things that you can really tell, definitely. And plus in post, you need to spend time on sound and the look of the movie and make sure you're giving the sound is great and it enhances the project.
For sure, yeah. That's a really
Those
important
things really help.
That's great. Thank you so much, Patrick. Lauren was asking if she wants to do a deeper dive. Do you teach somewhere or offer a more sort of one-to-one?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I teach individually or with small groups, and they can connect with me on HUSSLUP.
Perfect. I love it. They sure can. Well, thank you so much, Patrick. This was great. I think you really gave us an excellent overview and some deep dives on where budgeting is really has to be thought through carefully and some tips and tricks of the trade. And thank you to everybody who joined us today for this webinar. We really appreciate everybody turning out and asking some great questions. We hope you got a lot out of it. Please connect with Patrick on HUSSLUP, and we hope everybody has a great evening. Let's hustle up.
Awesome. Thank you.